Hi everybody, this is Dan Stolebarger. Welcome to this week's KFIR Middle East update down here in sunny San Diego. And it's the week of August 16th. It's our Middle East update. Right from the get-go, I like to encourage you to go to our website because this is going to be longer than intended. I try to keep it at 10 minutes, but I'm going to have to skip over some of the articles that we have, but they're on our PDF PowerPoint. You can access that at holygroundexplorations.com. Usually I talk about something that I kind of want to get off my chest. I call it my musings. I'm going to put that at the end, and we'll jump in right now to kind of our news bites for the week. Carolyn Glick, somebody that I greatly respect, one of the editors of the Jerusalem Post, you know, in regards to what's just taken place over this last couple weeks where some terrorist outside of Hebron stabbed a Yeshiva IDF student and left him on the side of the road for dead. And of course he did die. But, you know, in Israel, the funerals are the next day. And at the funeral itself, right behind the thousands gathered as mourners for this, the Palestinians were setting off fireworks in celebration of this event. And Glick writes, our Palestinian, quote, peace partners shot off fireworks in celebration as terror victim Devar Sorek was buried this evening. He buried in full view of the mourners, the self-proclaimed champions of peace and the two-state solution advocates that want to advance peace, celebrated with fireworks. They are not peace proponents. They are apologists for evil. Next up, are there actually congresswomen today who actually support violent riots in Israel? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. AOC, her comment was basically regarding the Palestinians is that they have no choice but to riot, probably not realizing that that just rubber stamps these terrorist murders that have taken place, the rockets that fall on innocent civilians. According to AOC, they don't have any other choice but to do this. I'd like to give a pat on the back, a good note to the UN. The UN, believe it or not, called the Palestinian Authority under the carpet for hate speech, anti-Semitism, and incitement regarding their textbooks and their government statements. I never thought I'd hear that, but credit where credit's due. And then the saber rattling out of Iran. The Iranian general goes on record to say that Hezbollah currently is strong enough to annihilate Israel completely on its own. Got to put the glasses back on. The glare's pretty strong. So if you take a look at this, and again, I encourage you to go to our website. It's Tisha B'Av this last week, the 9th of Av. As you know, for the Israeli people, a day of tragic events, beginning with the spies that came back that Moses sent out. Remember, he sent 12 out, 10 came back with a bad report. 2, Joshua and Caleb, came back with a good report. Both agreed, great land, giants in the land. Joshua and Caleb said, with God we can do it. The other 10 that won the opinion of the masses, I guess you would say, said, it is a great land, but we're like grasshoppers, we've got no chance. God said, have it your way. You'll die in the desert, I'll give it to your kids. But because of that lack of faith, they were not able to receive what God had promised. Now on that same day, the 9th of Av, both temples, Solomon as well as Herod's refurbished temple, Solomon's destroyed by the Babylonians, the second temple by the Romans, were destroyed on that same day. So in Israel, obviously, the religious Jews wanted to make their way up to the Temple Mount to pray. And in response to that, what do you think takes place? As you can see in the photo, a banner on the Temple Mount that basically states that this is a battle for the mountain of God in all of Israel. Riots took place. There's a stabbing that we'll talk about later. And you know, the question really is what's the big deal about the Temple Mount for Islam? And you have to understand that in the eyes of Islam, you know, they didn't come to live alongside of Judaism and Christianity. Islam came to the world to take its place. With that as an example, you know, when we think about Abraham, he's what, the first Muslim. All the churches, when Islam conquered the land, the Ottoman Empire, all the churches become mosques. It's said in their writings that King Solomon built a mosque in Jerusalem. And as Islam sees it, when a Jew prays, it's bad. When he prays in Jerusalem, it's worse. And when he prays on the Temple Mount, God forbid. And so you can understand the rhetoric and the incitement that's taken place over this last week or so. The killers that I alluded to from Carolyn Glick's comments that killed Devor Sarik were apprehended. The Israeli army said in a statement on Saturday that they were apprehended outside a town in Hebron. At 3 in the morning, security forces broke in. They were sound asleep and they woke up to the IDF. Now, as you know, this was just a brutal murder, but these so-called peace partners that the world is expecting Israel to negotiate a peace deal with, the Palestinian terror groups of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, of course, they praised this attack and are making these two teenage boys, or these two, not teenagers, it was a teenager that was killed, these two Arabs as martyr heroes. And no doubt they'll receive quite a bit of stipend money as they're incarcerated. I'm going to have to fly through the next part, so you're going to have to get that PDF and read from yourself. You know, it's apparent that the Democratic Party is becoming more and more anti-Israel, even though there was a group of Democratic Congress members in Israel wanting to make the statement that not everybody is on the side of the so-called squad, but it is obvious that this new socialist infusion into the Democratic Party is much different and is anti-Israel. So you can read about Kamala Harris and her stance. And again, it should not surprise us that President Abbas met with the Democratic contingency that was there from Congress, but snubbed the Republicans. When we look at, it's the proverbial, you know what's going to hit the fan, because just out today, no entry. Israel has decided to bar U.S. Congresswomen Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib from entering the country. God only knows what's going to happen next in regards to all of this. But Trump was encouraging Netanyahu not to let them in. And so the reasons given from Israel is that that their entry was denied because of suspected provocations and the promotion of BDS, a reference obviously to the anti-Israel boycott movement. There's an article here that I think is important to take in, the fallacy or the incomprehensible concept of accepting the two-state solution. Take a look at that. There's got to be another way, because that just ain't gonna work. Jordan's a mess right now, and King Abdullah is stirring up issues with the Temple Mount or whatever, just to preserve the Hashemite kingdom in Jordan. Some are saying that he's looking to establish a third intifada in order to gain support for the Palestinian people. We'll have to wait and see what takes place there, but as we talked about last week, we've already got major issues in Lebanon with Hezbollah. Of course, in Syria, with the Iranians wanting to get a foothold there, and of course Hamas down in Gaza and Islamic Jihad, and now it looks like Jordan is becoming a hornet's nest. There's an article here, I'm going to read it to you. We're going to go over a little bit, but it's called "They Are Kids." You know, because of the incitement on the Temple Mount this week, Tisha B'Av, what I talked about, 2 Muslim kids exited the Temple Mount. They ran to commit a stabbing attack on Israeli police officers. Thankfully, only one officer was lightly wounded. They shot. They didn't hit, but they stopped the attack. But what society educates their children to commit suicide missions and stab police officers? It's the same society that educates its children that Jews are evil, the same educational institutes that run military training camps for their children, the same society where parents teach their little kids how to stab. The incitement in the textbooks, this culture is death, genocidal, and it's called what? Palestine. That's what you're dealing with. Last article, you'll see that there's, per Israeli media, the IDF is planning to build a defensive wall to provide adequate additional protection for the communities near the Gaza border. You can see a photo of that. And now let me get back to the end, or my beginning, what I usually do with musings. This week it was just released that the Anglican Church is close to removing a prayer for the conversion of the Jews from its official liturgy. The prayer will be replaced with one calling for reconciliation with the Jews. If ratified, the motion will go into effect and the Church will no longer officially call for Jews to abandon their faith. You know, when I read this, boy, do I love the concept of reconciliation with the Jews. Do I love the concept of understanding our Jewish roots. Do I love the concept of Genesis 12. But I cannot accept this in terms of saying that we should not be praying for the conversion of the Jews. I realize that this is a sticky issue, but this is what I do know. I know that God is not finished with Israel. I know that the church doesn't replace Israel. And I know that we're seeing Israel return to the land. I know that I know from the scriptures that God is going to break in. I don't know when, I don't know where, but I do know that Israel will come to know Yeshua as their Messiah. I'm knee-deep in Zechariah, and there's promises right and left in all of this. But in the meantime, I think Genesis 12 is still in effect. I think that our actions towards Israel need to be through love, service, and blessing. I think that's what Paul indicates in Romans 15. But to stop praying for their conversion, I'm not an in-your-face, argue sort of guy. But when I read my Bible, I believe that Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. I don't know how he's going to do it. I know that the Jewish people are his problem, but you know what? I will continue to pray that their eyes would be open for them to receive their Messiah. That's my 2 cents. God bless you. Shalom.